Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about a question which keeps coming up. Doesn't matter if it's comments in the YouTube section or if it's people meeting with me one-on-one to pick my brain. People want to know, at what point am I too old to have a professional career as a fighter? They might say, it's my dream to enter the UFC, but I'm 22 years old. I just think it's too late for me. I have no prior martial arts experience. So today we're going to be talking about what is the oldest age I believe you can be to still pursue your dreams of becoming a UFC fighter or a kickboxing champion. All right, guys, one of the common questions that I've been getting on this channel a lot, especially when I do Zoom privates with people are like, Gabriel, I finally have you, I can talk to you, and I want to know, is it too late for me? Is it too late for me to be a high-level fighter? And so many of these guys are so young. They're not in their late 30s. They're not somebody who's even like 30 years old. We're talking about people who are like 20 years old. And I want to take you guys through today a breakdown, a timeline of basically, when it's too late for you to have that dream of becoming a UFC champion. We're going to go step by step, age by age, and I think you will be surprised at how old I believe you can be to start martial arts and still have that dream of being in the UFC alive. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want us to go to the latest time where you could join the UFC. If you are 40 years old, it's probably unrealistic that the UFC is going to go, yeah, you know what, we'll sign you. It's possible, but it's unrealistic. So what we're going to do is we're going to say the latest time that you want to get signed by the UFC is 38 years old. A lot of people might go, 38, you're an old man. I'm 38. I do not feel old. I'm getting stronger. Maybe the speed drops a little bit. I haven't noticed it yet, but maybe it has, just little bit. But being 38 is realistic to join the UFC. I know people who have joined the UFC at 38 years old. One of the guys in town got it. He was just like, I just want one fight. That was his dream, one fight in the UFC. He got signed, and I believe he did it. I actually didn't keep in touch with him and see if he actually got it, but he told me he got signed with them. So this is a realistic age. 38 years old to get in the UFC. But of course, they're not just going to sign you with no pro record. What does your pro record need to look like to get into this promotion, and how long will it take to accomplish? Well, we want to be realistic with this. Let's say you're trying to get in the UFC, you're trying to get there fast. Let's say you can get a really good record, like 0 losses, or maybe just 1 loss. And I believe in 8 to 10 fights, if the UFC likes your style, they think you're exciting, they will sign you. So how long as a pro fighter does it take to get 10 fights? Well, let's say that you're doing 3 fights a year. You're motivated. You want to fight. You want to get there as fast as you can. So let's say 3 years will get you around 9 fights, and that 8 to 10 fight period is what we're looking for. So you sign at 38 with the UFC, you start your pro career 3 years earlier at 35. But obviously that is not enough, because you can't just go into pro fighting. There's stuff that has to happen beforehand. And we're talking now about an amateur fight career. When looking at an amateur fight career, we have to go, okay, how many fights do we need to turn pro? We obviously don't want to do one. There's not many people who do one amateur fight and go, yeah, I want to jump from 3-minute rounds to 5-minute rounds, and I want to take on all the additional things like smaller gloves. You need a little bit of experience. And I would say realistic, 5 amateur fights. With 5 amateur fights, especially if you have an undefeated record or a 4-1 record, you can turn pro. So 5 fights, how long does that take? Let's say we can get that done in 2 years. That's realistic. One year you fight twice, next year you fight 3 times. So that takes us from 35 to just 33. You could start an amateur career at 33 years old and still have your dream of being in the UFC alive. But obviously, amateur is not just gonna happen like that. How long do you have to train before you're gonna be good enough to become an amateur fighter? Well, that right there is the tricky part. And that all comes down to how hard you train, how disciplined you are, how good you are, how your skill level rises. Are you an athlete before you came to striking and jiu-jitsu and all those other things? So let's say for argument's sake, that you're coming in with zero experience. You don't know what the heck you're doing. You just know, maybe you watched UFC last week for the first time. You're like, my gosh, I want to do that. I want to do that so bad. And you can start your amateur fight career at 33 years old, and you're going, how long do I need to train before I have my first fight as an amateur? Well, I would say realistically, if it was striking, just striking, you could start in maybe even 18 months. But we're not talking about just striking. We're talking about getting down jiu-jitsu, some wrestling. We have to learn the wall wrestling. There's a lot to take in. So with all that in mind, I would say 3 years. I'm going to say 3 if you're starting from scratch, because first year you're going to be awful. Like, there's a few people who look great in the first year, but for the most part, you're going to need a lot of work. You're going to be improving, learning everything. Year number 2, hopefully you're making some good headway, jumping, really skilled. Number 3, people are like, whoa, this guy's good, and we need to get him a fight. So all of a sudden, we're like, okay, you know what? We were talking about starting an amateur career at 33 years old, and you have 3 years beforehand, which you need for training. Where does that leave us? That leaves us at just 30 years old. 30 years old to start striking for the first time. Now, we are crunching this down. We're condensing this into a tiny time period. If you have extra time, if you're in your 20s, it's great. It's great to have extra time. You don't have to rush. You don't have to be like, oh my gosh, the clock is running out. But I just want people out there to know that if you are somebody who's 22, 24, 26, you're like, shoot, it's too late for me. I don't have a chance. You do have a chance. You have a very good chance, assuming that you want it enough and you're dedicated. And all this means is, yeah, you're going to have to work hard. And yeah, you're going to have a job on the side, because they're not going to get paid any real money until you get to the UFC when you're 38. So you have to have another job on the side. You'll have to go from working that job to slipping some training in, back to the job. But I know of many people who have done this, many people who have been successful having a full-time job and getting themselves into the UFC and then transitioning full-time to becoming a fighter. Is it an easy road? No. But if you want to pursue your dream, it is possible, and that is the main thing. We need to recognize that this idea that, oh, we didn't start striking sports when we were 10 years old, or we didn't do wrestling or jiu-jitsu when we were a teenager, and it's too late for me. That is not true. And you don't have to give up on your dream just because somebody says, oh, you didn't have that childhood of learning those fight sports. Yes, it'll make it easier. And yes, it'll make the whole thing so much smoother, but you can still do it. So I hope this episode helps some of you guys out there understand that no, you don't have to give up on your dream if you are somebody who's in their 20s and wants to be a pro fighter in the UFC. Still a very much realistic dream. You're just going to have to work hard, as I already said. So let's call it there, everybody. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like. If you have not already, join the channel, get subscribed. As always, guys, train hard, stay motivated, and I will see you back here soon for another video.